I'd like to introduce this panel. We're going to be talking about product and team alignment, because that's one of the biggest challenges that a lot of companies and teams face. Is how do you make sure that all of the team are heading in the same direction and working towards the same goals? So to start off, I'd like to get the panel to introduce themselves. So we have Mandy Michael, Magda Griffins, and Maria Edwards, as Jovi mentioned. So can we start with you, Mandy? Could you give a quick introduction to yourself? And also, while you're at it, can you just describe, when we say team, what does team mean to you?
Sure. Hello, I'm Mandy. Slight thing with my work at the moment. I used to be the dev manager at Seven West Media in Western Australia up until like a couple of weeks ago. Now I'm a software engineer at a company called HireUp. So what I guess team for me, because I'm like in this transition between two sort of different companies. At my previous work, where I was the development manager, the team for me was one big team where we had we were basically the product team. We had developers and designers and product managers and data and insights and testers and everyone was in one group, and we all worked together towards a roadmap that we would work out together every quarter. And then we would work with other areas of the business, like sales and marketing and editorial. So Seven West Media, which I failed to mention, is a news organization, just in case you didn't know. And in Western Australia, we focused on newspapers, but the digital versions of those. So that was like super duper fun. And my current work, it's a little bit different because there's a lot more people, although there is still one big product team that consists again of designers and developers and managers. Because there are a lot more people, it's actually also then grouped smaller into teams that you work with day to day that focus on specific areas or problems for the business. So, you know, depending on what their requirements are, you will focus on that and get really deep into that. So for me, I'm currently going through this thing of thinking about the pros and cons of both of those setups, because I think there are benefits and there are negatives to both. But I think it's inevitable, like the bigger a team gets, the more likely you are to split them up. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at with what a team is and what I do right now.
Great. We'll probably dive a bit deeper into those differences as we go through today. Same question to Maria.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. So myself, I've been kind of a wayward journey. I've been in the past an art director, and then dabbled into starting my own business after exploring what UX was back in 2014, and have since, you know, fortunately been across a couple of great companies working in CBA and Exetel, and now with Woolworths and their digital arm Woolies X as a senior UX manager there. So it's been, you know, a journey over 3 years there now, and they started back in 2017, and the team itself has, you know, largely grown and ballooned over the last year because of the demand, obviously, we see in retail and the efforts around, you know, the community at the moment to support essential services. But the team itself has grown in my direct practice, in the UX practice, and then also the other practices like the product, the development team. So it's really just ballooned over the last couple of years. And to us, you know, I think when we're looking at teams, it's really people who are working towards a shared goal, and bringing along their own capabilities and set of expertise to kind of work towards that goal. And so with our teams in Woolworths and Woolies X, it's so large, the ecosystem itself, that we are actually really working towards a culture and still maturing around that. How do we work better? How do we engage each other? And also particularly in this time where it's quite distributed as well.
Great. That's good. Interesting. So we've got a bit of a difference. So that's going to make great conversation, hopefully, as we go through. And finally, Magda, can I get you to introduce yourself as well, please?
Yep. Hi, everyone. So I'm a senior product manager at eBay Classifieds Group. I work with Gumtree Australia. eBay Classifieds Group is made up of many brands internationally. For instance, in Canada, there's a classifieds called Kijiji. In the Netherlands, there's Marktplaats. Gumtree UK for the UK side, and so forth. And so over the years, eBay's been acquiring various classified sites, and Gumtree sits under that umbrella. I'm responsible for shaping the experiences that connects buyers and sellers, as well as brands and advertisers, with our customers using data, messaging, and other forms of technology. I work with the leadership team as well as my cross-functional team. As we are a global organisation, we do work individually as Gumtree Australia, but globally our goals are pretty much defined. So that has taken years for the company to do that. I've been working at Gumtree for the last 5, and I can't say that there is a stop. That evolution will continue. Transformation and change will always happen, no matter what stage the organisation is, whether they're at the startup stage or mature, or acquired and part of a merger or an acquisition. We also have, we're a matrix organisation. So that means that we do work in cross-functional teams, broadly speaking, product design, UX, analytics perhaps, but we also have within those teams representatives from the broader organisation. So a team will have a sales representative and a couple of people from the sales team, if that team is rallied around goals for sales, for instance. Same with marketing, and so on. So the reason that we work in that way is just to bridge that communication channel. So if they come along on the Agile and Scrum ways of working, those team members hear it from directly from a developer. They don't have to go through a filtered process. So that's that process has sort of occurred within the last 2 years, and I've been part of the change agent group to help bring along that change within the business.
Great. Now that sounds really good. I love the going even broader out to the wider business to make sure that you don't have, because a lot of times you have that product owner or product manager who becomes a kind of a barrier or a filter. Yeah. Exactly. So just, you mentioned about the business goals. How are the business goals defined for your team? Who sets them, and how much input does the team have?
So we work with OKRs, which are objectives and key results. Objective is the broad goal. Key results is the specific, something that we specifically want to achieve within that. For those that may not know, the analogy I use is the broad goal may be renovating a home, and the KR, the key result, might be doing up the kitchen. Another one is doing the floors, and so forth. And so teams are based around those, because I mean, to do it, say for instance, if we delve deeper into the kitchen analogy, you need the plumbing, you need sinks, the drawers, and everything else that comes in. And so the teams are responsible for that side. So, okay, we know that we need to build a kitchen, and that comes from leadership. So the leadership team will say, yes, look, we're building a kitchen. We need, this is the funding or resources or whatever we have. This is, broadly speaking, what we hope to achieve. And the team sets out, and at that point, they have the ownership to make the decisions and recommendations back up to say, well, you know what, it's better for us if we move the plumbing from one wall to the other, because that will enable blah, 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 blah. And so the teams are empowered to work in those ways. So both top down, bottom up.
Great. And Maria or Mandy, is there any differences? Do you use OKRs? When we're talking to people, OKRs just seem to be becoming an industry standard at these days. Is there any differences in your teams, Maria or Mandy?
No, a lot of relatable synergy around what Magda touched on. The difference I think we've seen, because we're maturing, is we're now setting those goals probably a lot closer in the year. So we constantly assess. We always have assessment of, are we tracking to those goals? And if we need to reassess or change the direction of whatever we've just launched, we can constantly look at that analysis and reset what those goals might be. And then, you know, if we need to cycle that up to our leadership team and talk through that. So we have lots of checks and balances within the team to kind of make sure we're on track.
Yeah, I would say it's very similar in both the teams that I've worked in recently. One thing though that might be interesting is that when I first started at 7 West Media in WA, there was no real web or digital product team. When I started, the team was being made. So at that early stage, a lot of the goals and the decisions were actually driven by the team itself, because they kind of never had a product team focusing on, I guess, technology in that regard. So they weren't really sure what direction to head in, and all of the people in the business who had that knowledge and experience and that background were in that product team. So in the early days, it was very much driven by us in the product team. And then I think as time went on, we were able to meet some initial goals that we had set. And then we moved to aligning more with broader business goals. And much like Maria and Magda have said, you know, you kind of have the goal that you want to head to. And then the team would say, okay, well, we can accomplish that by doing this or by doing this. And this is how we will do it. So yeah, I think it's very similar, but I do think it's interesting that, you know, when you think about early days of setting up a product team in a company, how they can kind of start by driving everything and then, I guess, assimilate into the business and become, I guess, a bigger part of a whole.
Great. One of the things that I've seen with a lot of teams, so that was really interesting, the organic way, but when it's coming from the top down, I've seen them being very heavily business objectives. And what I mean by that is kind of this quarter, we want to get 100,000 signups, or we want to make X amount of million, or whatever the objective would be. As a team, and I'll give this one to you, Maria, from a user experience point of view, how do you fight for the UX, kind of the user's goal, in marrying that with the business objectives?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, in an infancy when we started, it was really closer to us identifying what those were and measuring them back to, you know, wider ceremonies where we talk about this is what our users require of our products and services, and identifying them, because we never really started our digital business back probably around 2015. So we really were trying to understand, firstly, the lay of the land, how our experience in products and services would drive a longer customer life cycle and engagement as they shop. Now that we are learning a lot more about our customers, we constantly have an always on research team, and we are looking constantly at our data that we're receiving, whether it be from our customer hub agents through to our research that we conduct week to week, which is really fantastic. I think we've really matured in that area where we constantly are assessing our customers. And then we have, you know, real ceremonies where we support and socialize this information. It might be through a fortnightly showcase and really linking that back to specific experiments that we're testing, back to initiatives or programs that the teams are working on. And so it makes it really clear and transparent whether we are understanding what the customers are experiencing, and, you know, reading between the lines of what we don't know about them as yet, because there's, you know, coming from COVID, there's so many different online, we onboarded a lot of new online customers, and we were seeing trending behaviors that were shifting because of that. So we were able to kind of step change some of that and really introduce that back to our overall strategy. And I think if as much as possible we do this real time, and having an always on research team and conducting this really helps drive that transparency and back to the strategy.
And when you come up with that kind of, so the team is continuously researching, they find out something, they discover something that's unexpected and it's new, and this is going to be big for the plans that you already have. What kind of process do you have for kind of, okay, you were saying socializing it, but how do you actually turn that into action?
Yeah, so we work, we have forums within across the teams. It really is driven from our research, whether it's the data that I mentioned earlier or the analytics team. We partner constantly with other practices within the business to understand that. And some of the key actionable things we do is work towards bringing that real-time data back to our end-to-end customer journeys, for example. As we have this artifact that we continually communicate back to the teams, are we addressing and investing the right amount of money across areas of the business that we know are changing, or across the projects that we're currently working on, is one area that we you know, constantly address and bring back to our teams. And then across, you know, some of the strategy, so long-term strategy, you know, there's tactical and the long-term strategy. Long-term strategy, we work with our partners in the business to understand benchmark assessment of customer behavior and really map back to what they're doing. Is it changing, or can we improve our products and services based on their behaviors, and really model what the next project focus is for our products and services.
Great. Thanks. That's really insightful, kind of in your internal processes. Magda, you mentioned that you have like the OKRs coming down from management, and then you also have kind of the bottom up kind of feedback about what's happening with your users as well. How do you ensure everybody's aligned? How do you make sure that everybody in the team is very clear on what the OKRs are, and equally then on sharing and bubbling that insights up?
Yeah, so very similar to Maria, we have certain rituals where we open up with the team's purpose is to, you know, increase users, or whatever the KR is. And we use Showcase for that. There's ideation sessions and other like online forums, Slack channels, and so forth. In terms of how do we get that alignment? That alignment is actually global as well. So we don't have, whilst the KRs may alter, but may change between teams, fundamentally our goal is to make buyers and sellers successful. And so as long as we're doing things that enable users and so sellers and buyers to do that, that meets our key objective. And we've really summed it up to 5 or so KRs that the organisation is and globally is really focusing on. So that was established by leadership. To get to that though, it wasn't just, oh, we should be doing this. There was a lot of input from customers, a lot of input from our analytics team, from finance, but also ensuring that it aligns with our long-term strategy. So it was a number of factors, a number of workshops. It was not something that happened in one meeting. This has so. And stepping back, those 5 key OKRs are actually the same year on year. The numbers might change, but overall it's been the same I've been there for 5 years, and fundamentally they've been there. There's also, like, we've done a number of training sessions. One was like around the metric that matters, to get that alignment and to bring people along on those journeys. And that also helped the team that communicates back up understand, how these took place, the why, the story behind it, and also the background thinking of why those metrics are important.
Great. One thing I just want to touch on, because that alignment is really challenging. I'll give this one to Mandy, because you've jumped between teams, and I'm not sure actually, because Australia is doing quite well in terms of coronavirus, but are you remote? So is being remote harder to get alignment?
I will answer that question, but I just wanted to say one thing about the goals, if that's okay. When people talk about goals, you always think about the big things that you're aiming for. But one of the things that I always used to talk to the developers in the team about, and the designers, and just generally in the communities that I'm a part of, is that when you're aiming for those big goals, and you want everyone to be aligned, that's great, especially when you want to, address the user needs. But any time that you do something, whether it's, focusing for the user or for a business goal, you can improve something for the user or for the business, even if it's just like a small thing. Because if you're developing something or you're building something, there's always little things that you can improve. And sometimes those tiny little things that you improve as part of a larger goal can actually have a really, really big impact. So I think you can weave a lot of smaller things as a I guess, contributor in the actual team, and weave that into the goals that you're trying to accomplish for the business. And I think that's a really good way for people to feel like they're contributing and be aligned, to feel like they can actually improve something that's really bothered them for a really long time as part of whatever the larger goal is. But on the remote thing, so Australia has been okay. Perth in particular, in Western Australia, we have not really had a problem until, ironically, just this week, where we went into lockdown. But we've been totally fine since middle of last year. When we did go into lockdown early last year, I would say as a dev manager, it was very, very difficult because, I was so used to working with people face to face, and I think all of my experience around trying to get people aligned was face to face. So being suddenly thrown into that environment and trying to work through that was quite difficult and quite challenging. And I think, it was hard, but you kind of just get used to it and you find ways to work through it. And when coronavirus became a thing, there was an influx of resources that you could go and look at to help you if you didn't really know. But yeah, I would say it did impact us, and what we actually ended up doing, because it was just short time for us here in WA, is we kind of shifted what our goals were. So we focused on things to be more task-based rather than, the sort of ideation and things where you might work face-to-face. So for us, it was easier to deal with because we just shifted what we were aiming for. It was very stressful and everyone was having a hard time. So trying to get people to come up with big ideas and solve complicated problems was a little bit of a cognitive overload, I think. So our strategy was to just focus on tasks and things that we knew how to do, and work through a bunch of that stuff. And that's still valuable, obviously, because the business still needs those things to be done. So that was kind of how we managed it. I definitely found it challenging as a manager. So and I know that the team found it difficult as well. If I had to do it long term, like now I'm full-time remote, there are a lot more different strategies that you can employ. And I think the company that I work at now, with me being full-time remote, have regular ceremonies and meetings and things to kind of share that, and they're very good at documentation, and the communication is a lot more asynchronous. So it's not that difficult to align people remotely if you need to, and there are a lot of resources out there to help you if you're new to it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm currently in Europe, so we've been in lockdown literally for a year now. So we're all coming to terms with how to try get alignment because we have to.
Yeah,
um,
you figure it out, right?
yeah. Um, so just one thing I want to touch on is scale. So there's one thing about aligning an individual product team, but in larger organizations, and Magda touched on this, the kind of the matrix structure um, that they have in eBay Group. How in Maria, how does it work for Woolies? So if you're working in one product team, how do you ensure alignment across multiple teams to ensure that you're all heading towards the same business goals?
Yeah, I think this is a work in progress, definitely. I mentioned earlier we ballooned the team. It grew probably around, we started the team around 34 and now we're 64 in our practice. And, that's just speaking on the UX practice, but let alone the rest of the other practices like development team and product team and analytics and finance and so on. So I think we are working with adjusting what we can do. Some of the things like communication, as Mandy touched on, like being remote, we've found when initiative would kick off, which we would do naturally in person, and that was a lot more collaborative, a lot more alignment, because we were just able to contact each other one-to-one. I think as we've distributed and as we've grown, and being remote has had its challenges. And one of the things we're counteracting with that is creating probably a lot more meetings to sync around what are we tracking to the project goals, and also from a UX practice, how we're measuring back to these. Our team itself is spread across around, I work directly within our e-com business unit, and that alone has around 8 squads, and then across the business there's around 30 odd squads. So alignment, we're working towards, first kicking off with that, essential kickoff session, which we run before a project goes through its business case and understanding what the goals are, and then we align through this session and ceremony. And that was a lot easier when we were obviously in one room or talking to each other in person. So we've tried to adapt as we've scaled, and continue working towards ceremonies that we can break down as we work across the project. And that's been one of the areas that we're really trying to work across. And then secondly, we have showcases to kind of look back on what is the experience and how do we work together with our product and development team towards it. And that might involve having really clear, I suppose we constantly are working with product artifacts like customer journey maps or project status meetings, where we just try and understand where we're at in the actions and really align across the distributed team. So it's a work in progress, I think, and we're working through as best we can around these areas and the challenges.
Great. I could probably keep asking questions forever, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I'm just going to ask everybody to give a very quick kind of, what are you excited about for the future? So Maria, if you want to go first.
Particularly around our industry, I think retail and food itself, it's just been really interesting with the incumbent people that are in industries that are coming after us in terms of the customers and the experience itself. And it's really interesting how we can really fix the customer and products along the experiences that we're creating. And some of the things we've tried to adapt to certainly is, more innovative ways like meal boxes or express delivery service, for example. And I think the next breed of what we bring out should be addressing, the foundational issues, but also some of these exciting ways customers are demanding of the way they shop online, particularly how they've changed their behavior through COVID. So I think that's one area definitely we're keeping an interest on, because it's always constantly changing.
Great, thank you. And Magda?
I'd say I'm most excited about human-centered design approach and design thinking becoming mainstream. A few years ago, organizations were just learning about it, and today it really is a way of working. However, it's not a cookie cutter approach. What works for one organization doesn't necessarily work for someone else, but the fundamentals do. And I'm excited by that constant change, having that growth mindset and empowering teams, everyone within the team, to be able to speak up, to share an idea, to test it, to, bring about that change so that it is a collaborative effort. But really having that human-centered approach, or that the human-centered hat on, is what excites me as more and more organizations adapt to these ways of working.
Yeah, no, that's great. Like, it just reminds me of Jeff Bezos standing down, because Amazon is probably one of the most kind of customer obsessed organizations, and it's when you're at 900 billion a quarter, growing at 44%, and then I think you can safely step down. Then you've done enough. And finally, Mandy.
It's a good question. But I just recently, as I mentioned earlier, moved to a new company, and it's called Hire Up, and they are a platform which sort of helps people with disabilities to find and hire and manage support workers who are sort of matched to their needs. And what I really love about, I guess, the product, but also products in general and technology, is being able to provide something that can help people in their day-to-day. And what in particular I like about this is that can really help to drive better user experience and accessibility and things like that for, I guess, a much broader audience. I think as a developer, I've always been really interested in building products which can reach as many people as possible. And I think being able to work for a company that aims to do that is something that I think is really important. And I would love to see a lot of other companies put more effort into making more accessible and generally more user-friendly products for their users. But I think generally from a future of products in general, I really, really like how over the past decade or so, products have focused a lot into iterating and improving parts of their business, parts of their products, to make them as user-friendly and accessible and allowing users to accomplish their tasks much more efficiently. I really like tinkering and poking around on small aspects of things, and that the industry has kind of allowed us to do that, rather than always trying to do something really big and flashy. Actually getting to work on small parts and delivering that and demonstrating the change and the impact that a small change can make. I think that's really exciting and really, really fun. And I hope more people learn to enjoy the pleasure of making one small change that has a big impact for a lot of people.
Great, thanks. All very inspiring kind of looks at the future. We have gone over time, so apologies for that, but I'd like to thank our panel, Maria, Mandy and Magda. Really insightful, and thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back to Jovi now.